On the morning of October 10, 1978, a woman known to her sparse collection of neighbors in the Verdun neighborhood of Beirut as Anne-Marie Lefebvre carried a box of sterile gauze pads into the ground-floor apartment she had recently converted into a small, sparsely equipped public health clinic. She moved with a practiced economy of motion, her focus absolute, a demeanor her neighbors attributed to the quiet professionalism of her Swiss nursing background. They saw a compassionate, if reserved, European woman dedicating her life to providing rudimentary medical care to the local community, a welcome presence in a city fractured by sectarian violence. What they did not see, and could never have conceived, was that Anne-Marie Lefebvre did not exist. She was a legend, a meticulously constructed identity inhabited by a Katza of the Mossad, an operative whose true name was known to fewer than 5 people in the world. The clinic was not a place of healing, it was a forward observation post, a communications hub, and a potential emergency exfiltration point, established for the sole purpose of orchestrating the assassination of a single man. Every gauze pad, every vial of antiseptic, every piece of second-hand medical furniture was a prop in a theater of death, and its director was this unassuming woman whose gaze, when unobserved, held not compassion, but the cold, patient focus of a predator. The problem facing the Israeli intelligence community, and specifically the Caesarea department of the Mossad, was a man who had become more myth than mortal, Ali Hassan Salameh, the chief of operations for the Palestine Liberation Organization's intelligence wing and the commander of Force 17, Yasser Arafat's elite personal security detail. Dubbed the Red Prince for his lavish lifestyle, charisma, and brutal effectiveness, Salameh was the principal architect of the 1972 Munich Olympics massacre, an act that had seared itself into the Israeli national psyche. For 6 years, he had been the primary target of Operation Wrath of God, a sustained campaign of retaliatory assassinations against those responsible for the attack. Yet, Salameh had proven uniquely elusive, a ghost who moved effortlessly through the high society of Beirut and the back alleys of refugee camps, protected by an almost preternatural sense of danger and a sophisticated, multi-layered security apparatus. Previous attempts on his life had ended in catastrophic failure. A 1973 operation in Lillehammer, Norway, had resulted in the assassination of an innocent Moroccan waiter, Ahmed Bachiki, mistaken for Salameh, leading to the arrest of several Mossad operatives and a devastating international scandal. Other plots, in Spain and Tarifa, had been aborted at the last minute as Salameh, seemingly guided by instinct, altered his plans without explanation. The conventional methods of intelligence gathering and assassination, short-term surveillance, hit-and-run attacks, compromised informants, had all proven ineffective against him. His operational security was flawless, his routines deliberately erratic, and his network of informants within Beirut's complex political landscape was second to none. The continued failure to eliminate Salameh was more than an operational frustration, it was a strategic and psychological wound, a constant reminder of Munich and a symbol of the PLO's seeming impunity in their chosen capital of terror. A new approach was required, one that abandoned the element of speed for the virtue of patience, a plan so audacious in its long-term commitment and so deeply embedded in the target's environment that it would become part of the very fabric of the city he dominated. To understand the solution, one had to first fully comprehend the challenge presented by Ali Hassan Salameh himself. He was not a typical militant leader hiding in a bunker. He was a paradox, a revolutionary who lived like a playboy, a trained intelligence officer who courted public attention. Educated in Cairo and Moscow, he possessed a sharp intellect and a deep understanding of tradecraft, which he applied to his own protection with rigorous discipline. His days were intentionally unstructured. He might spend a morning at the Fatah office in Sabra, an afternoon at the beach with his wife, the former Miss Universe Georgina Rizek, and an evening holding court in a fashionable Hamra Street café. He changed vehicles constantly, favoring a rotation of Chevrolet sedans and Range Rovers, and never announced his travel plans in advance, not even to his own bodyguards. His security team, Force 17, was not a clumsy gaggle of thugs but a highly trained and fiercely loyal Praetorian Guard, skilled in counter-surveillance and preemptive action. They were known to shadow their own principal from a distance, watching for watchers. Salameh's true genius, however, lay in his cultivation of human intelligence sources. He maintained relationships with the Christian phalangists, the Lebanese intelligence services, and even, it was rumored, with mid-level officers in the Central Intelligence Agency, playing factions against each other and creating a web of obligation and information flow that served as his early warning system. He was physically imposing, handsome, and exuded a confidence that drew people to him, making him a public figure who could hide in plain sight. Penetrating this world required more than technical surveillance, it required an asset who could exist within his ecosystem without triggering his finely tuned sense of suspicion, an operative who could watch him for months, learning the subtle rhythms that lay beneath the deliberate chaos of his life. The challenge was not simply to find him, but to understand him so completely that his next move could be predicted before he himself had decided upon it. The proposal that emerged from a series of tense, closed-door meetings at Mossad headquarters was radical in its simplicity and its demand for long-term investment. It was codenamed Operation Epidaurus, a nod to the ancient Greek sanctuary of healing, a darkly ironic choice for a mission of vengeance. The plan abandoned the model of sending in a transient hit team. Instead, it called for the insertion of a single, deep-cover Katsa who would establish a permanent, static observation post with a direct line of sight to a location Salome was known to frequent. The analysis of Salome's fractured routines had revealed one thin thread of consistency: his daily, or near-daily, journey from his apartment on Rue Madame Curie to his mother's apartment on Rue Verdun, and from there to the FATA headquarters. His route was variable, but the two endpoints were fixed. The strategy, therefore, was to control the space around one of those endpoints. The solution was to rent an apartment overlooking Rue Verdun, directly on the path he often took after visiting his mother. To justify the long-term presence of a foreigner in a sensitive Beirut neighborhood without raising suspicion, the operative would need a bulletproof cover. The idea of an artist, used in the failed Lilyhammer operation, was discarded as too bohemian and conspicuous. Instead, the planners settled on a more altruistic and functional legend: a medical professional. A foreign nurse or doctor, operating a small, quasi-charitable clinic, would have a legitimate reason for her presence. A clinic would also explain the occasional delivery of supplies, the presence of technical-looking equipment, which could mask communications gear, and a trickle of visitors, potential support operatives disguised as patients. Most importantly, it provided a cover for an activity that was central to the mission: watching. A person staring out of a window for hours on end is a spy. A nurse in a clinic waiting for her next patient is simply being diligent. The clinic would be the weapon, a Trojan horse of compassion wheeled into the heart of the enemy's stronghold, designed not to heal, but to create a single, perfect kill box. The risks were immense: the psychological toll on an operative living a solitary life for what could be over a year, the danger of discovery by Salome's paranoid security apparatus, and the political fallout if a humanitarian clinic was exposed as a Mossad front. The preparation phase of Operation Epidaurus was a masterclass in the meticulous and multilayered art of intelligence tradecraft, a process that took nearly a year before the operative ever set foot in Lebanon. The first and most critical element was the selection of the Katsa. The psychological profile required was extraordinarily demanding. The candidate needed more than just fluency in languages and proficiency in covert operations. She needed immense psychological resilience, the ability to withstand profound isolation, and a capacity for deep swimming, the total submersion of her own personality into a fabricated identity. She had to be someone whose motivations were powerful enough to sustain her through months of monotonous tension. The search led them to a woman in her late 20s, a British-born immigrant to Israel whose family had been victims of a terrorist attack years prior. This personal trauma was not seen as a liability but as a psychological anchor, a source of cold, unwavering resolve that transcended mere patriotism. Codenamed Penelope, she possessed a quiet intensity and a remarkable memory for detail. Her psychological evaluation determined that she was highly compartmentalized, able to separate her operational function from her emotional core, a critical trait for preventing the psychological erosion common in deep cover assignments. Her training was tailored specifically for the mission. While already a trained operative, she underwent an intensive 4-month medical course run by military doctors, focusing not on advanced surgery but on the practical skills of a community nurse, treating minor injuries, administering vaccines, diagnosing common ailments, and, crucially, mastering the vocabulary and procedural confidence to appear utterly authentic. Simultaneously, she spent 6 hours a day with a linguistics coach, refining her French to a flawless Parisian accent and her Arabic to the specific dialect and cadence of Beirut's educated class. She was taught to think and even, her trainers hoped, to dream in her new languages. The construction of the cover identity, the legend of Anne-Marie Lefebvre, was as complex as building a warship. The Mossad's Documents Division, a unit filled with artisans of forgery, created a life for her on paper. They chose Swiss nationality for its reputation of neutrality and the difficulty foreign agencies had in obtaining information from Swiss cantonal authorities. A genuine Swiss birth certificate was procured for a child who had died in infancy decades ago, and a new identity was built upon that foundation. A passport was created, not a pristine new document, but one that was artificially aged, filled with entry and exit stamps from countries a person like Anne-Marie would believably have visited, charity work in India, a holiday in Greece, a nursing conference in Germany. The stamps were applied using period-authentic ink formulas and handcrafted rubber stamps, and the passport spine was carefully broken to simulate years of use. A Swiss driver's license, an international health insurance card, and membership cards for fictitious book clubs and charitable organizations were all fabricated. A financial history was established through a series of anonymous wire transfers to a dormant account in a Geneva bank, which was then activated under Anne-Marie's name, creating a trail of legitimate income from a fabricated inheritance. The most subtle and brilliant element of her cover was the creation of a psychological backstory. Anne-Marie was conceived as a woman deeply committed to social causes but also emotionally scarred, a private person who used her work as a shield. To reinforce this, she was given a hobby, painting. This provided a plausible reason for her to spend long hours indoors and to be seen carrying canvases and art supplies, further deflecting any suspicion about her reclusive nature. It was a detail borrowed from past operations, a proven piece of tradecraft that added a layer of relatable humanity to the cold artifice of her existence. The technological and tactical preparations were equally granular. The Mossad's Technical Operations Unit, Neviat, was tasked with equipping the Beirut clinic. Every item had a dual purpose. A portable X-ray machine, procured from a defunct dental practice in Belgium, was modified. Its interior was hollowed out to house a state-of-the-art burst transmission radio, capable of sending encrypted data packets in milliseconds to a listening post on a ship in the Mediterranean or to the embassy in a friendly neighboring country. The machine's lead lining provided natural shielding against electronic eavesdropping. A standard ophthalmoscope, a device for looking into the eyes, was fitted with a high-resolution, pinhole camera lens. During a feigned examination of a patient, another operative on a check-in visit, Penelope could discreetly photograph documents or faces, with the images stored on a microdot disc hidden inside the handle. The centerpiece of the surveillance effort was a long-range camera. It was disguised not as a single object but as components of a physical therapy traction system. The telephoto lens was concealed within a chrome-plated steel tube, the camera body within the weight mechanism, and the remote trigger within the handheld control switch. When assembled, it looked like a piece of standard medical equipment, but when aimed through a specially treated window pane that reduced reflection, it could capture clear images of a person's face from over 200 meters away. The most critical piece of tactical hardware was the explosive device itself. Intelligence suggested Salome was a creature of habit in his choice of cars. The plan called for a car bomb, a method that offered a degree of standoff distance for the triggerman. Mossad procurement agents, operating under a commercial cover in Germany, purchased a Volkswagen Beetle identical to one they had observed being used by PLO functionaries in Beirut. They then located and purchased a second, identical Volkswagen in Lebanon through a local cutout. This second car was the one that would be used. The explosives were not crude TNT but 150 kilograms of composition C4, a plastic explosive chosen for its stability and immense brisance, ensuring a kill radius that would overcome any last-minute swerve by the target vehicle. The explosive charges were molded to fit perfectly within the car's door panels, under the seats, and within the spare tire, distributed to direct the blast wave inward and upward, maximizing its lethality against the car's occupants. The entire system was designed for remote detonation by a radio signal, with a multi-stage arming sequence to prevent accidental firing. In late 1978, with the legend perfected and the tools prepared, Penelope, now fully inhabiting the persona of Anne-Marie Lefebvre, initiated the insertion phase. She did not fly directly to Beirut, which would have created a clear travel record. Instead, she flew from Zurich to Cyprus, spent 3 days establishing a tourist legend, and then took a ferry to the Lebanese port of Jouni, north of Beirut in Christian-controlled territory. Her entry was deliberately low-key, logged as just another European visitor. From Jouni, she took a service taxi into West Beirut, the Muslim-majority sector where Salome lived and operated. For 2 weeks, she lived out of a hotel, meticulously following the prescripted behavior of a newcomer. She visited various international aid organizations, making inquiries about volunteer opportunities. She met with local real estate agents, expressing a desire for a ground-floor apartment in a quiet but central neighborhood suitable for a small clinic. Her search was not random, it was guided by a list of pre-scouted buildings provided by an earlier reconnaissance team. She eventually chose an apartment on Rue Verdun, a location selected for its clear, unobstructed view of a 150-meter stretch of the street that Salome's convoy was likely to use. The apartment itself was unremarkable, which was precisely why it was perfect. After signing the lease, using funds transferred from her Swiss bank account, the slow, methodical process of building the nest began. She hired local workmen for minor renovations, deliberately choosing a talkative crew whose gossip would spread the story of the kind Swiss nurse and her charitable project throughout the neighborhood. The medical equipment, shipped from Europe as humanitarian aid to a shell charity, arrived in crates. Penelope supervised its installation, her movements calm and purposeful, betraying nothing of the lethal technology hidden within the benign-looking devices. She established a routine, opening her clinic for a few hours each day, treating minor cuts, distributing vitamins, and offering basic health advice. Her patient load was small, which she explained was due to her limited resources, but it was enough to solidify her cover as a genuine part of the community. The build-up to the execution was a grueling test of psychological endurance. For months, Penelope's life was a monotonous cycle of waiting and watching. Every morning, she would position herself near the clinic's front window, sometimes with a book, sometimes pretending to organize medical supplies, her eyes always on the street. She used the disguised camera to document every vehicle and pedestrian that passed, building a vast photographic library of the neighborhood's daily life. This was not just surveillance of the target, but of the entire environment, identifying the patterns of local police patrols, the schedules of shopkeepers, the faces of the neighborhood children. All this data was transmitted nightly in encrypted bursts from the modified X-ray machine. Her handlers communicated with her through coded messages embedded in French radio broadcasts and through occasional, patient, visits from other Mossad operatives passing through Beirut, who would come in for a blood pressure check and leave with a microdot of film. During this period, she made 2 positive identifications of Salome. The first time, his convoy of 2 Chevrolets swept past her window without stopping. The second time, he was on foot, walking with 2 bodyguards. On both occasions, she simply observed, logged the time, the direction of travel, and the disposition of his security detail, and continued to wait. The tension was immense, a constant, low-level hum of adrenaline that never dissipated. She lived in total isolation, her only human contact superficial and scripted. The strain of maintaining the Anne-Marie persona, of performing compassion while feeling only the cold focus of the mission, was immense. Her handlers, monitoring her psychological state through the tone of her reports, noted her clinical detachment was holding, but they knew it was a finite resource. In early January 1979, the intelligence picture she had so painstakingly assembled was deemed complete. Salome's habits, while still erratic, now contained predictable elements. A second operative, an explosives expert and veteran of Neviat operating under the identity of a German engineer named Peter Skricka, was dispatched to Beirut. He entered the country separately and did not make direct contact with Penelope. His task was to prepare the Volkswagen. He rented a garage and, over the course of several days, meticulously packed the C4 into the vehicle. The detonation system was a dual-component device. The receiver and the primary explosive charge were in the car, but the final arming sequence required a secondary, coded radio signal, a failsafe to prevent a catastrophic error. Once the car was prepared, the engineer parked it along the curb on Rue Verdun, directly in Penelope's line of sight, in a spot that a local shopkeeper often used. A small payment to the shopkeeper had ensured he would park elsewhere for the next week. The engineer then left Lebanon, his role complete. The final piece of the puzzle was a third operative, the triggerman, who had entered Beirut under yet another cover. He checked into a hotel with a view of the same street, but from a different angle. He and Penelope were now a two-person team, connected only by radio. Penelope was the spotter, the eyes, of the operation. Her sole job was to make a positive identification of Salome in his vehicle and give the go signal. The triggerman's job was to press the button on her command. For 11 days, the Volkswagen sat parked on the street, an innocuous part of the urban landscape, containing enough explosive force to shatter a city block. Each day, Penelope watched, and each day, Salome did not appear. The tension ratcheted up to an almost unbearable level. The car was a ticking clock. The longer it sat there, the greater the chance of it being discovered, towed, or even stolen. On the afternoon of January 22, 1979, at approximately 3:35 p.m., the rhythm of the street changed. A red Chevrolet Impala station wagon turned onto Rue Verdun, moving at a moderate speed. Penelope recognized it instantly from her surveillance photos as one of Salome's lead cars. Through the telephoto lens hidden in the traction device, she saw his bodyguards in the front and back seats. Seconds later, a second vehicle, a black Chevrolet Caprice sedan, followed it. She zoomed in on the passenger side of the Caprice. There, unmistakable, was Ali Hassan Salome. He was in the front passenger seat, talking to his driver. Her heart rate, which she had trained herself to control through biofeedback techniques, remained steady. She picked up the small, disguised radio transmitter, a device that looked like a pager. She pressed the transmission button once. It was a simple, nonverbal signal, a single, encrypted pulse that communicated one word to the triggerman in the nearby hotel. Now, she continued to watch, her face a mask of clinical detachment, as the Caprice sedan drew level with the parked Volkswagen. From her vantage point, she saw no flash, only a sudden, silent expansion of reality. The world outside her window bulged outward. The Caprice seemed to lift off the ground, disintegrating into a blossoming fireball of orange and black. The sound wave arrived a fraction of a second later, a physical blow that buckled the reinforced glass of her clinic window and shook the entire building. The air filled with a storm of metal and debris. The Chevrolet station wagon that had been leading the convoy was thrown across the street, and the concussion shattered windows for hundreds of meters in every direction. The street, which moments before had been a scene of mundane afternoon traffic, was now a smoking crater, a tableau of apocalyptic destruction. Penelope did not linger on the scene. Her actions in the moments after the detonation were as pre-planned and precise as the assassination itself. The escape and extraction phase had begun. She calmly walked to the back of the apartment, where a small suitcase had been packed for months. It contained a change of clothes, a new set of forged identity documents under a completely different name and nationality, and a large sum of cash in various currencies. She took the microdot film from the camera and the memory chip from the communications device, placed them in a small, acid-proof container, and swallowed it. She then wiped down every surface she had touched with a special chemical agent that would obliterate fingerprints and DNA evidence. The entire process took less than 3 minutes. She walked out the back door of the clinic, into a small alleyway. She did not run. She walked at a steady, unhurried pace, just another civilian moving away from the chaos. The screams and sirens behind her were just background noise. Her pre-planned route took her through a series of side streets, moving perpendicular to the direction most emergency services would be coming from. 45 minutes later, she arrived at a prearranged rendezvous point, a bustling bus station on the outskirts of the city. There, she boarded a public bus heading north toward Jouni. Her transformation was complete. The quiet Swiss nurse had vanished, replaced by a nondescript French tourist. By the time the Lebanese authorities and PLO security forces sealed off Rue Verdun and began the painstaking process of sifting through the wreckage, the woman who had orchestrated the entire event from her clinic window was miles away, dissolving back into the anonymity from which she had come. The triggerman followed a separate, but equally precise, exfiltration plan. Within 6 hours, both operatives were out of Lebanon, their legends discarded like old clothes. The immediate aftermath in Beirut was chaotic. Force 17, leaderless and enraged, swarmed the area, their search for answers hampered by the sheer devastation. The blast had killed Salome instantly, along with his 4 bodyguards and 4 innocent bystanders, including a British student and a German nun. The strategic value of the operation for Israel was immense. Salome's death decapitated the PLO's operational command and sent a shockwave of paranoia through its leadership. Yasser Arafat, who had been on the same route just minutes behind Salome, was convinced the bomb had been meant for him, leading to a bloody internal purge of suspected informants and collaborators. The intricate network of intelligence and operations that Salome had personally managed for a decade collapsed overnight. The PLO's ability to project terror internationally was severely degraded, a blow from which it would take years to recover. For the Mossad, it was the final, bloody closing of the Munich file. The failure at Lillehammer was avenged, and the myth of Salome's invincibility was shattered. Yet, the long-term consequences were complex. The operation, while successful, had relied on methods, deep-cover civilian impersonation, the use of a humanitarian front, and the acceptance of collateral damage, that raised profound ethical questions, even within the ruthless logic of intelligence warfare. The abandoned clinic on Rue Verdun was eventually cleared out by Lebanese investigators, who found nothing but mundane medical supplies. The true nature of the apartment and its quiet, compassionate tenant was never discovered by the public. It remained a ghost, a silent testament to the invisible war being fought in the city streets. For Penelope, the cost was personal and incalculable. She was extracted, debriefed, and decorated in a secret ceremony. But the mission had fundamentally altered her. For over a year, she had lived a lie so completely that the boundaries between her true self and the legend of Anne-Marie Lefebvre had blurred. Returning to a normal life was an impossibility. The psychological conditioning that had made her the perfect operative also made her incapable of forming genuine human connections. She had looked into the abyss of her target's life for so long that she had, in a way, become a reflection of his solitude. The clinical detachment that had been her greatest asset was now her prison. The success of the mission was absolute, but it had required the sacrifice not just of the target, but of the operative's own humanity, a cost that would never appear on any official ledger.